All right, welcome to our podcast today on this beautiful morning here at Brighton Recovery Center. Here with me, I have Sally and Janie with me. They are both women who have been involved with Brighton in one way or another for the last 2 and 3 years. They attend a weekly community group that runs here on Sundays at our IOP at 2 o'clock, and regular attendees to that program. Probably some of our most stalwart and foundational members who have really kept this group going as long as it has. Also, both of these women have had sons who have been a part of Brighton's residential treatment program, and so we've not only seen them as supportive features of their children's treatment, but we've also seen them as women in recovery of their own. And the issues that we deal with week after week are so intimate and so personal, and just the bravery, the authenticity, and the vulnerability that you've both had through that process has been absolutely amazing. So as we welcome you in, I really want to thank you. I know that this is not easy to have headphones on and big mics in front of you while cameras are staring at you, but it's been a process to get you here to a point where you can be a beacon of hope and light to those who may be struggling with some of the same issues that you and your families have. And I can't wait for people to be able to see that. Was I supposed to say something about Google and Stitcher now, or is that at the end?
Now would be good too.
Okay. And for those of you who are tuning in, please know that you can get us on any of your favorite podcast mediums, or Google Play, Stitcher, or iTunes as well. We have our Recovery Soapbox, which is also broadcast on YouTube. So it's very hard not to find us, right? And I know a lot of people from our group are able to watch us on Facebook and like our page that way, and can see those posted there regularly too. So hope that you can stay current and continue to be a part of these podcasts with us. All right, so let's start into the dialogue, my friends. I know every week when we start our group, we go around if there's a new member and we introduce ourselves and we say something interesting about us as people, and then why we're here and what we get out of the group. I'd kind of like to do that with you right now, if that's all right, and just let people get to know you and your interactions with being a part of such an amazing facilitation, with sometimes 10 or 15 other people, right? Janie, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm JD, and I, like Cameron says, my son was part of Brighton, and that's how I got introduced to this group. But this group is so amazing, and we meet every Sunday. It's like we're family there. There's several of us that attend on a regular basis, and we come together for strength. We pull strength from each other, and we understand. We talk the language. Once you've been in recovery, just like your loved one would be, you learn to talk, the talk of recovery and the help, and being able to share that and also gain that from other people is why this is such an important meeting for myself to attend. And we do. We really enjoy each other, and we look forward to it. When you hear the other people that come to the meeting, they're like, we all look forward to this Sunday 2 o'clock meeting. So that's my take on it. So.
And why do you keep coming? That to me is so fascinating that, week after week, religiously, you keep showing up. What part of that keeps pulling you back? Why is it so valuable?
And I've found that while I'm in recovery, I need the tools to keep me grounded and keep me on my path of recovery, to focus on myself and not to focus on my loved one's disease. That I have my own disease and my own path that I have to stay grounded with and use the tools. And it's like anything. If you don't continue to use those tools and know they're in your toolbox and you set them down, you will start to go back to where you came from. Right? And it's so important for us to not go backwards, but to move forward in our recovery. And so that's why it's important for me to keep coming, is And like I said, I gain a lot of experience when I keep coming from other people that attend the meeting. You know, being able to share, but also being able to gather some of their experience and strength and hope for recovery on my own program. So that's why I keep coming.
Yeah, that's what I hear from you week after week, and so many people benefit from that strength. I know a lot of folks who will be watching this podcast and learning about these ideas for the first time are going to look at you and be like, what, recovery? What do you need to recover from? What's your addiction? What's your problem? Why do you talk about it like this is a disease inside of you? You are here supporting your family member. Why are you talking about it like it's your problem? Do you mind addressing those questions?
Sure.
And what that's like for you?
The reason why I have to be in recovery is because I'm addicted to my addicted loved one. My behavior becomes distorted and my thinking becomes distorted because I'm so focused on them. And really it's giving me the opportunity to stop, look at myself, and understand that this disease it affects all family members. And so you have to work on yourself and understand that recovery to me means being able to look at myself and not focus on them. You know, what brings me joy, what brings me happiness, not focused on how I can make them happy.
Exactly.
So that's where I'm at.
And I think that's so interesting when we're sitting in this group week after week, is that you can tell kind of where someone's at in their own process by how they talk when they are spending that time, right? Those who have been in for a long time are sitting there talking about their struggles and their process to find joy and take care of themselves. And those who have been there less time are talking about their loved ones and all the problems they're causing and like what they're struggling with this week. And so I think that evolution is just key to have each piece of that in there together. And I think you speak to that really well in that, yes, I have an addiction of my own. It may have different symptoms, but when addiction enters a family, it affects everyone. And we all have to be aware of how that disease is impacting us and how we're contributing to the dysfunction of the system, right?
Right.
Thanks, Janie. Sally, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Sally, and I've actually been coming to the Sunday group from pretty much the very beginning. And I found the group through somebody down at USARA had recommended, because I was at a meeting there, and they said, gee, there's a new group that just started in South Ogden, and it's a community group. And I thought, great, it's easier than going down to Salt Lake. And so that's how I found out about it. And what intrigued me was the community aspect, that it was certainly run by and founded by Brighton Recovery. But at that time, I hate to say, I didn't even know about Brighton Recovery. And but I was just so thrilled to have a community-based recovery group for people who were struggling with, loved ones with addiction and that type of thing. So that was my very beginning, and I have not stopped. It has just been fabulous because it really does everything that Janie has touched upon. I couldn't agree more. There's a sense of true community, family, sharing, respect, understanding. And we're all at different points in our own personal recovery, so we are constantly sharing and processing and trying to find that center of that stability for us in terms of emotional sobriety, so that we are there for us. We are taking as good care of ourselves that we can possibly do, so that we can be there for everybody in our life, not just our loved ones in their addiction. And my journey and my recovery is so similar to my loved one who struggles or is in recovery, we're kind of doing the same thing, but so independent of each other. And it's a sense of freedom. And it gives me the ability to really take care of what I need to do, maybe work a little harder in a certain area. But the group keeps me focused. And what's so unique about this group is that it's facilitated by Kamrin, and he is so understanding, compassionate, educational. There's always a learning moment or a golden nugget that you walk out with, and he will, in his very magical way, just kind of like guide us back to where we need to be. And within an hour, it's only an hour, we cover so much territory. It's just amazing. It really is. So it works.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you.
It works.
Well, and I love when we get at the end of the hour, everyone's like, "Oh no,
Oh, I
it
know.
can't be over." I always feel so bad when they ask, like, "Can this just be 2 hours?"
Truly.
Because when you have a room full of 10, 15 people, everyone wants that same piece, right? That same time in the spotlight, that same support from everyone in the group, because it's just so valuable. I love that you highlighted the facilitation piece therapeutically. I think that's part of it, of course. And when you look at the wisdom that is collectively being gathered in that space, it's astronomical. Like, it can't be duplicated any other way. And when somebody speaks and you've got a whole room of people that can say, "I've been there. I know exactly what you're talking about. I've done that. I've said that. I've cried those same tears." And we all sit there and we're with each person as they process the pain that brought them into that space. And I think in the beginning, 3 years ago when we started this, it was very much about, how do I help my loved one through this addiction, right? Like, that's kind of what we all walked in the room with. And what it's evolved to since that time has become, how do we process symptoms of codependency so that we can lead healthy, happy lives away from our addicted loved ones? So,
absolutely.
right? It's almost
yeah.
become like a codependency support group. And the principles we teach, right?
Yeah, we're when someone is speaking, and especially if somebody is new to this journey and what's going on, I mean, we all immediately focus on that person, not on this, the one that's struggling with their addiction or what's happened, and, did the police get involved? None of that stuff.
No.
It's more, what, it's going to be okay. This is a process. It's going to take time. We've all been there, and everybody is different with how they do process what's happening, and don't feel badly. This will continue to work out, but it's about the person in the room, and
Absolutely.
that's where it needs to be, because it's such a powerful, insidious disease, and we really do need help to really understand that process and what we can do to cope with the highs and the lows, because they're going to happen every single day, and not just with our loved one who has addiction, but in everyday life.
I agree, Sally, that so much of our focus has been on the addiction that we lose ourselves. And so when we can separate ourselves from the addiction, both ourselves and them, and focus primarily on ourselves, it's such a freeing experience. And I know I've been on the journey for a while, but when I first entered into the journey, my whole focus was, how do I get them better? Mm-hmm. And I never said that they need to get better, but what I'm doing is making them sick. Right. I never was able to identify that my behavior was contributing to their illness. And to me, I thought I was really contributing to them getting better, right?
Yeah.
But I felt that it was really, I was trying to ease my own pain and not letting them suffer their consequences. And so I'd get entangled in that mess. And so in this, this meeting that we have, I see that community, starting from the very first of where I want to fix them, to progression to where some of us are at that says, that's their journey, this is my journey, I have to take care of myself. Right? And so prematurely, that I think when you first come in, it is, I want to fix them.
Mm-hmm.
That you're not even part of the factor. Your wants and needs have been so overcome for so long that it's hard to recognize that. It takes, like Sally said, a process to say, yeah, I want what they have.
Yeah,
Right?
and it's but we're, a lot of us are moms, and that's our natural instinct, is to take care of, nurture, fix them until they get better. I mean, it's and what we have found out through our own how we deal with it is that we almost have to do the opposite, like counterintuitive parenting that we talk a lot about in the group. And that's, what we think we should do, we have to step back and think that through and say, almost the opposite. And that's hard. That's like learning a new language. And you have to really get comfortable with that and, do what you can. I always say that, as a parent, whatever action or whatever you think you're doing, you have to be able to put your head on the pillow at night and be okay with it, because you don't know what the outcome is going to be. But and that all goes back to taking care of yourself. You have to like what you're doing, like who you are, and be okay with that, because it's everybody is different with how they react with that.
And as I hear you guys talking, what I see that you're all speaking to the same list of characteristics as, any kind of diagnosable condition, which, by the way, this is not. It did try to get into the latest version of the DSM, but it was shot down. It should be in there, but it wasn't. But if it did get into a diagnosable condition, it would have these kinds of traits. These were the traits that were submitted, and they're the ones that you guys have been talking about all along. Neil, if you could please post this as well. It's mentalhealthamerica.net, and they have a codependency link that you can go and you can take a questionnaire. Am I a codependent? You can see the article that they wrote that kind of explains codependency. But I really wanted to highlight the characteristics of codependency as they list on this site. It says, an exaggerated sense of responsibility for the actions of others. You were talking about that as a child. A tendency to confuse love and pity with a tendency to love people that you can pity and rescue. I mean, you had children, but for those who have spouses, I mean, that is exactly what they're doing, right? A tendency to do more than your share all of the time. A tendency to become hurt when people don't recognize your efforts. Oh, you better recognize what I'm doing for you. An unhealthy dependency on relationship. The codependent will do anything to hold on to a relationship to avoid the feeling of abandonment. That's more for a partner, but yes, I'm sure you feel that too. Abandonment can also be death, right?
Yeah.
An extreme need for approval or recognition. Always wanting to do it right?
Yeah,
Did we do a
yeah.
good job? A sense of guilt when asserting yourselves, like, oh, I just asserted myself, like now they're gonna think that I'm a total raging bitch. Compelling need to control others. We've covered that, Janie, thank you. A lack of trust in yourself or others. I mean, I covered the self piece, but absolutely we stop trusting those around us. That's what causes that isolation. Fear of being abandoned or alone. Difficulty identifying our feelings. Rigidity, difficulty adjusting to change. Things need to be the perfect outcome. Problems with intimacy and boundaries. Did an excellent job talking about that, Sally. Chronic anger. I mean, we're the sweetest people on the outside, but just like, don't go too deep because you'll see so much more. We lie, right? And we're dishonest to cover up the actions of our loved ones, to cover up that they're in jail again, to cover up that they're in rehab again, to cover up that they're using in our basement again. Tons of that going on. Poor communication. right? Like we don't really know how because communicating causes problems.
So big. Yeah.
And difficulty making decisions. Am I doing it right? I think is what comes into play.
So true.
And as you both nod your head as I read through that list, I can tell that we're meeting the criteria for the most part all the way through, right? And then right below this is a list of 20 questions. Am I a codependent? And when I sent Neil the link, so you guys can actually go directly to this site and take this quiz as well. And when you're dealing with a disease like addiction, it's so easy to miss how the disease turns natural loving processes into toxic enmeshed dysfunction, right? And what you could do with a normal or a normative child who didn't have an addictive pattern is not what you can do with this child, right? And the way that I like to look at it is like a loved family pet. If that pet gets rabies, you can't treat it the same as you did before, right? Mm-hmm. If you try to give it love, it will bite you and you will be very, very sick. And if you try to let it in the house and let it sleep in your bed like it always has, it's going to have a very different experience with you than it did before.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it's your same family pet, but you have to treat the disease that's inside of it or you'll never be able to welcome it back into your life again. Mm-hmm. And I love what a member of the group said yesterday. She said, I know that the only way I can help my loved one is if I help myself. Mm-hmm. And that is true. That is we have to keep the diseased part of our loved ones at bay until it's recovered, and we have to now clean the whole house and scour the tile with bleach and repair all the pillows that have been torn up because our rabid dog has just destroyed everything. And so that cleaning up, that regeneration process is what this is all about, right? It's restoring our sanity.
Yeah. And what goes along with that too is that keeping that addict self, we step back and detach, still loving, there's no doubt about that. But, I love that analogy of the rabid animal. Family pet, that's good. That's very good.
Well, and that's what I love about these groups is that we introduce analogies or metaphors or whatever it is, and then we keep going back to them week after week after week, right?
But that's what keeps you going.
Yeah.
It's the slogans or, if you go to different groups, those are our coping skills. That's what kind of keeps us, going. And, but you can't, I find myself, if I step back and think I have it or I can manage it and I don't need it, especially when things are going well, that's when I need it the most.
Yes,
to keep it absolutely part of my everyday existence. And that's what's so good about the group. It because there are checks and balances. We all kind of check up on each other, and it's in a very loving and forgiving way. And it's the process that makes it work. It really does.
And Sally mentioned that we're both mothers, but I also see spouses in there that are at how do I deal with my life? It's chaos right now, right? Mm-hmm. So I see that pain also, and I love this person and their life is in chaos, and I think I also have to take care of them, and they lose focus of themselves also, right? It's like. And so, and the one rewarding thing that I think is the personal growth you can see with people that come to the meetings week after week, just how they progress and able to move the focus from their loved one's illness into their own recovery. And it's always so amazing to see that transformation over time, right? So they start early and they pick up a few tools, a few nuggets, a few everything, and they'll even express in our meeting that, I was thinking about that and I could hear you guys' voices, right? So
I know.
You hear that. And even someone that's been on the journey for a while, you still sometimes can fall back into your old habits. And again, even though you've been there, you hear the voices of the people in the group that says, are you focused on this, Are you acknowledging this? Are you accepting what's going on? Those type of things. And so it is a wonderful group. And like we said, we do get that little bit extra that you wouldn't get in some of the other programs with a professional counselor in there to direct the conversation and keep it grounded in where we're going. Right? So that's always a benefit. So.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I love that piece of it. I love to be there. I know that you've got, the Al-Anons and the CODA meetings and the 12-step based groups that do serve a very valid and valuable purpose in the recovery process. And this is very, very different from that. Mm-hmm. Yes, we're all there and we're all supporting each other. And once in a while, there will be an amazing therapeutic tool that can be extracted. And then we pause and we talk about it for a minute.
I think what works so well in the group is that you turn it to the rest of us to say, so what do you think about this? Let's hear about, all of you and your feeling with how you've processed hope and what, how it's worked and how it hit. And so that's where you get that's what it's all about. And then they have an opportunity to hear from different people and their experiences, because it's all our own personal experience, but that's what is just so powerful, and they can process that. It's not just you saying, oh, no, you can't use hope or something like that. It's listening to all of us who have been in the trenches, who have been there, fighting and gone through this process. And that's what you walk away with. And those are the voices that you hear, when you leave the group. You're like, oh, I remember. Yeah, that was her experience. And yeah, I think, so you start implementing that. And that's what works.
Absolutely it is, yes. And I'm just realizing now as we're, into this a little ways that people listening don't know who you two are. Like, would you mind just sharing a little elevator pitch about the journey that you've been on and kind of how you've seen your own growth through that process? I think that would be really beneficial for people to know about.
Sure. Like I said, I started this journey probably 12 years ago when my son was struggling with the disease of alcoholism. But as I've learned in going through this and going through the process, I really have been affected by this disease, even as a young child being raised in an alcoholic home. And so some of my behaviors are justifiable to me because they're all I knew. And so as I've gone on, and of course as we've found that these diseases are family diseases, right? And so it goes. And then with my son, my reaction was different, and my relationship with my son was different than my relationship with my father. And so my son really was more of my focus because of him being my son. But as far as my traits and my personality and my focus and my not wanting to pay attention to what was going on in my life, I learned that denial at a very young age. And then when I got with my son, I really did have what I have recognized as control issues, right? Even as a child, I wanted to have a perfect outcome. I was actually addicted to a perfect outcome. As a small child, I didn't want to cause problems. And even with my son, I wanted a perfect outcome for him. Just like I have with other people in my, not even the addicted people in my family. Clear down, so you start to recognize those things, and that's what I've found in my journey is there's some things you just don't have control over. And it's a whole lot of stuff, right? The only thing the only thing you have control over is your behavior. And that's kind of where I am in my journey, is being able to recognize through this process some of my behavior traits, and that's why the tools are so important to me, is because they help me go back and process things from a childhood and how I behave and how I found that it really didn't do any good even back then, so why would I think it would now? But and so that's kind of how I've gotten where I am, just learning the certain things that make me react the way I do and acknowledging those reactions and acknowledging behaviors, because this disease has been part of my life, my whole life, since I was a young child even up to today's world. So that's where I've come through with my journey. But most of my focus when I wanted to get better was when I started getting really, really sick with my son. My illness was different with my son than it was as a child of an alcoholic. So that's kind of where I've come from.
And what about the aspect of why you keep coming? Are you comfortable talking about that piece of it?
Yeah.
And what's different about you than the other parents that we see typically?
And my son has now passed on. He passed away from alcoholism. And he actually committed suicide, but I think it was attributed to his alcoholism. You know,
Sure
I think
was.
it was that. And so, but those, even though he's no longer here, I am still sick. I am still the person I was that still has to process stuff, still has to have those tools, because the minute you lay the tools down, you slide backwards. And the one thing that is very important to me is I never want to be at the place I was when I was so sick and I had no tools. That pain has not gone away, even though my son's no longer here. I have other family members that I am addicted to a perfect outcome, and I want perfect for everyone, and I don't have control. So that's kind of a little bit different than most folks. In fact, my family will say, Mom or Aunt Janie, why do you still go to those programs? And I go to those programs for me. Not for anybody else, but for me to stay in recovery and to not slide back into the illness that I once felt. So.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's the most powerful component of your presence in any meeting is I'm still here. Because most parents, even if they don't realize it, their language states, it would be so much easier if they just weren't here. And what they're really saying is it's like it's more stressful to have them living than to have them gone. And what your presence in these spaces say is no, that is a lie that your brain is telling you. It is never easier. Your work is never done because the work is all internal. And we, in that early recovery process, we think it's all about them. And if they just weren't here, my life would be completely different. And what you're speaking to is that all of those same behavior patterns don't go away just because the addictive person isn't there anymore, right? And the fact that you keep showing up is a testament to that. Week after week, people get to hear your story and be inspired by that. And I know I am, especially as I get to just watch your strength. I mean, it hasn't even been 2 years, has it? He's been gone a little over
16
a year.
months.
Yeah, so it's still fresh, still new. We're working you through all your first holidays, all your seasons, watching those layers peel back, and you still are coming and getting that support through everything. And I just love that you have allowed us to be a part of that process with you. It's been amazing.
Thank you, Kamrin. But it is important, like you said, that we understand process, right? We understand that the pain doesn't go away, but the tools that you can pick and the support that you can get. I even see this, even though my son's not physically here, I see people move away from their programs when maybe their addicted son, daughter, wife, mother goes into recovery and no longer drinks, right? But they still have the same behaviors because their behaviors were not necessarily caused by the person's addiction. It's their disease is caused by their reaction and being able to distance themselves or separate themselves from the disease of addiction. So, I mean, even though he's not physically here, I see the same behavior. I've even had people say, well, my loved one no longer drinks, so I'm okay. Right.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, okay,
Yeah.
you might be, but I know personally I am not.
Yeah.
And that's why I keep coming back.
Yeah, we call those personality defects, right? And it's the personality defects that allow the addiction to generate and survive and perpetuate itself. And it's those that we go after, the personality defects. That's what we're going after to make sure that it doesn't have food to feed on. Because whether it's resentment or control or just pain that we're trying to escape from, the addiction's always there, ready to do that for us and give us a way out. Yeah.
Doing those
Thank you,
push-ups.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Would you like to
Sure,
contribute as well?
sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I guess pretty much as far as the addiction piece, that really started for me in about 2010 when I first found out about addiction. I had no idea. I was so blindsided and not knowledgeable whatsoever. And so that's when that all started. And as far as my journey and learning about myself, I think sometimes I say there's in every cloud there's a rainbow, because what I've learned about myself has been so important for me to carry on and continue to get healthy. And if it wasn't for the addiction piece, I think I would still be where I was back in 2010. And by that I mean through really good therapy, fantastic therapists, through meetings, educating, this type of thing, I found out and have, really worked hard on a couple of things with myself, and that was being a perfectionist, being a people pleaser, being codependent. And those were all just firing away. And then all of a sudden you throw addiction into that. And it was just, it was just a mess. So it's been through, where I am today. I work on those areas, because if I don't work on those areas, then I'm not taking care of myself, and then the addiction gets the upper hand. And it's really, I have found, and I've struggled with that, and I continue to, work on those areas, the anxiety and, trying to save and fix, and I would jump in and do whatever I could. And what I was doing was making myself feel better, taking care of that, and I was not letting my loved one really figure it out on his own and deal with the consequences. I didn't want those consequences, because I didn't, it was anxiety producing, and I wanted it to be perfect. I loved how you were referring to that, a perfect outcome. I wanted that perfect outcome, and I wanted to control that. So it all goes back to me and how I really have found coping skills and ways to not be so codependent, take care of myself, let go of the perfectionism, what happens, and the people pleasing. Oh my goodness, it's just, and they're all still there, but I keep them at bay, because I know what I need to do to be centered. And it's so easy to fall off center. It really is. And those old demons will come back. And that's where, my my groups, my coping mechanisms, listening to podcasts, listening to, picking up a book, reading it, whatever I can get my hands on, because it's a beast. It really is. So, that's pretty much my journey. I can say that I am a totally different person today than I was back in 2010, and I'm so happy with where I'm at. I couldn't be happier with that.
Yeah, and it shows. It really does for both of you. I think when we have these kinds of discussions, whether it's here or at the meeting, my favorite part of that process is reminding everyone in the room that the conversation doesn't sound any different at the residential treatment center than it does in that room, right? That the loved ones and the language they're using and the ways they're staying sober, the triggers that they're having, the temptation to regress or to go backwards. I mean, if you just changed codependency with substance use, you couldn't tell the difference between the two conversations. You wouldn't know if someone was in recovery for this or for an addictive substance or behavior. There's no difference, right? And that's why I love what you said about how no matter what side we're all on the same journey. We're all dealing with the same demon, and it requires the same antivenom or neutralizing therapeutic process. And I think that, when you talk about these recovery journeys that you've been on, it's really important not only to say, I've come super far with all of this, but to highlight how that was possible for you. Because I think for someone, like anyone entering a recovery experience for the first time, they're going to look at folks like you who have got long-term recovery and be like, oh my gosh, that's a language I don't even understand. That's a position I can't even imagine myself being in. I think the greatest tool that we have in our toolbox is boundary setting. And I think that's everyone's number one hot button topic, right? Or top shelf issue. How do I set boundaries? What are boundaries? And how am I supposed to use them in a way that doesn't cause more problems?
Oh, I can remember the first time I was going to, I think, Al-Anon, and back early on, and I think I stayed up all night to make my boundary list. I was so proud, and I walked in with 14 boundaries, and thinking, okay, I've done it, and everyone in the group just kind of looked at me, and they were like, okay, really, and my son's coming home, and I've got my boundaries, I'm good, and I couldn't. It couldn't have been farther from the truth, and it's boundaries are. That's an area that really needs to be discussed, because the boundary is for us. It's not for our loved one. And that's kind of hard to wrap your arms around, how can I set a boundary for me, when they're the one, it's my loved one that needs to be controlled and changed, because I'm going to set this boundary to fix, him. No, that's not how it works. And before the boundary, something that you had mentioned before, I just want to hit upon, and that is, I know in my journey, we will fail at what we think we should do or shouldn't do, and just go easy on yourself. It's such a tough thing, because you think you've got it, or you may be doing the right thing, and it probably is the right thing, but so many times it just doesn't work out that way. That's okay. That's how you learn. Every misstep or every miscue or unhappy ending, there's such a learning experience, and take that and then move on. So I just had to say that, because as a parent, we carry a lot of shame and guilt, not only for our loved one where they are, but then we're called enablers, we're called codependents, we're called all these things, and it's for a parent, for anybody that has a loved one in addiction, it's tough, because we have to, not take that personally, and realize that, we have to be, and that's where, if we're healthy enough, we realize that, we're okay with what we're doing, and that's at the end of the day, that's all that counts, is
Yeah.
we're okay. So I just had to say that when,
Thank you. I'm glad you did.
yeah, but back to boundaries.
And I know with me, when boundaries came in, I always thought it was to punish.
Oh, big
You know,
shift. Yeah.
I'm going to punish him, and I'm going to, almost like you would if it was a 4-year-old child, I'm going to put you in timeout. It had nothing. I didn't understand that boundaries were for myself, to protect me. And so for a long time, early in the process, I always go back to, it's like when you put your child on restriction. Who did you really put on restriction? It was
Right.
yourself, right?
Yeah.
But that was one thing that was really in my process early on, when people would say boundaries, it was almost like I wanted to punish them for their behavior. Right? You're not going to do this, and you're not going to do that, and it's all this and all that. So it's rules, wasn't boundaries. And until you could make boundaries for yourself, I think boundaries are real easy for someone to walk over. So you reset your boundaries, right? But would you identify that this boundary is for me, and I don't want to feel this way, and this is how I won't feel this way, as I set the boundary and says I will not accept unacceptable behavior. And these are what I call unacceptable behaviors for me. That's when boundaries started making more sense than when people would just say, well, tell them this or tell them that, or I, like you said, Sally, I'd make the list of, I'm going to make them feel the pain that they're causing me, right?
Yeah.
This is what it was.
Yeah,
And-
it's human nature.
yeah, and as you progress and you learn tools, you understand boundaries are for you and not for them. So that's what I had to learn, and that was a process to get there.
Oh, it so is. Because when we first start out, boundaries are seen through the lens of our own dysfunction.
Mm.
So if we're not healthy,
Yeah.
we're going to use boundaries in unhealthy ways. Of course we are. But the healthier we get, the more our perception of that tool changes. Just like if we don't know how to use a hammer, we can cause a lot of destruction with that hammer if we're just going around hitting things with it because that's what it looks like it's for, right?
Right.
But when we learn its purpose, it can then serve us in so many more ways. For me, the picture that I get in my head, and I even wrote a blog about this as well, was the analogy that we don't build the fence around the sheep to teach the wolf a lesson, right? We're not punishing the wolf like, you ate my sheep, no more sheep for you.
Right.
We're saying, wow, that really hurt my bottom line, that hurt my ability to support my family, that is really threatening me right now. And so I'm going to build this fence so that you can't get in. And if the wolf gets in, I fix the fence. I don't try to teach the wolf how not to eat my sheep.
Mm-hmm.
That will never happen. Our loved ones are demonically possessed. It's some alien force has taken over their brain. We don't even recognize them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I teach families all the time when we're setting boundaries that we have to name that behavior a completely different name other than our loved one, right? Like George Lopez, for all I care, but distinguish between my loved one and the monster inside of them.
Yeah.
Just like the novel Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde does, that was all about alcoholism. And he had to name those two parts of himself in order to distinguish, like, that wasn't me. And we hear that all the time from people who struggle in these areas. I don't know what happened to me. I was overcome. That was not what I would normally do. And so we're not ever trying to control that monster inside of anyone. It's uncontrollable. That's why it's a disease, right? Whether it's in them or in us as the codependent part of the disease. And I think I've even heard you guys say the same things, like when your boundaries are broken or when you're triggered or when your sons would relapse, you would relapse with them. The monster would come alive in you. You would act in ways that you would never typically act, ways that you would almost be embarrassed to come to the meeting and say, I did this. But like, it's still there. right?
Oh, yeah.
So we're not controlling that.
Right.
Like you said, Sally, it's
Right.
always there.
Yeah.
What we're doing is we're saying, I'm going to protect what I can, and you get to be you, boo-boo, right? Like, you go out and you do that. You destroy your life. You eat wild animals and do whatever you do in that area, but it doesn't have to happen in my safe space.
No.
And like you were saying, Janie, if it does, this is what I will do.
The consequence
Yeah.
is so important.
But me,
Yeah.
I'm going
For
to
me,
control
yeah,
my behavior.
Exactly.
So if you decide, hey, I'm going to bring drugs into your house, to my house, like if my child brings drug into my house, I'm not going to say, don't bring drugs in my house. I can't control whether or not you bring drugs into my house.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say, you don't get to be in my house.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I can absolutely control.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we're very careful. I loved what you said about your boundary list, because 14 items long,
Oh, yeah.
you probably weren't able to follow through on any of it.
No. No.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's very important when we pick boundaries, like, I'm not going to pick something unless I absolutely know I can follow through with
Right,
this.
right.
Right? Like, I'm not going to kick you out of the house if you bring drugs in the house if I don't mean it 100% and have the ability to actually put everything in bags, like the woman yesterday was talking about, her husband did, and like literally do that. I'm not going to even say it, because I'm not going to set myself up and them up for
Yeah,
the
one
fate.
healthy boundary with a consequence that you can follow through on is worth 100.
Yes.
That you don't do it all. I mean, it's yeah, you have to get to that point, and it's hard. It really is. But that's the key. That's when you know that, and when you do that and you follow through, there's such freedom. You really do get back to that being centered and being okay with everything that's going on.
Yes, absolutely.
Because there's acceptance, and there's a lot that goes into that. Yeah.
Would you guys mind talking about how boundaries have helped you to stay off the roller coaster and buying tickets to that ride? Another metaphor we throw around a lot.
That roller coaster.
Yeah. Early on, I was purchasing the ticket for both of us
to get on the ride,
to
right?
get on the ride.
Describe what the ride is.
The
for
ride
those
is,
listeners just learning about it.
Is the insane behavior, and then the normal behavior, and then the insane behavior, and then the normal, what we call normal behavior. And so you just, I always call it the manipulation game or the dance, however you want to do it. Basically, you learn how to react to each other very young, and it doesn't matter if it's in a marriage or if it's in raising a child, right? You understand how each of you are going to react. So if I say this, I know you're going to react this way, blah, blah, blah. So it's the dance, and then pretty soon you say, I don't want to dance anymore. And so you say, I have to separate from you a little bit. And then, but that's even hard, right? So you continue getting pushed, and I always want to say, as they're relapsing, you're going to relapse. When they're doing good, you're going to let your guard down. And then pretty soon the relapse comes. And it doesn't necessarily always mean with the addiction. It can just be with the manipulation, the lying, the things that their behavior is about. And you start buying into it. You start justifying it. You start thinking, yeah. And you buy a ticket and you go on the ride, and then you get on the ride and you're like, I don't want to be here. So that you try to pull away, and then but it all comes back to boundaries are so important, so you don't even initially buy that ticket for the ride. You're saying, okay, I'm not going to go on that ride anymore. I'm not going to fall for the non-truths. I'm not going to fall for your or my crazy behavior, thinking I have control, whatever those type of things are. A lot of it is just being able to detach, like Sally said, detach with love that says you can ride the ride, but I'm not getting on with you.
Yeah, like little kids in the Dumbo ride at Lagoon, right? Like, hey, sweetheart, you're doing good. And you clap when they come back around. You're not there, but you can be very, very supportive from the sidelines.
Oh, yeah.
But most parents don't think that's possible. Most parents believe, and spouses, that I have to sit right next to them and feel every high and every low, or I'm not a good parent, right? And it's that fear. Like when we talk about relapsing in codependency or in this place that you guys are describing, the relapse then becomes, or the withdrawal symptoms that we experience on this end are, I'm responsible for everything that happens to you. Every painful moment, every success, everything you go through, even if you die, that's on me. And that fear and that terror and that inability to disconnect from that unhealthy belief structure is what keeps us going back for the hope. The hope is the drug, and the fear of death is the withdrawal. And that dance that you talk about, Janie, back and forth, keeps us on that ride.
And
100%.
we're addicted.
Yes.
We are addicted to
Totally.
that. And it's not until, we have that aha moment, or, I think I've hit bottom a couple of times, and it's not until you get to that point where you then recognize, oh, I'm just never going to feel that way again. I can't. It's killing me. I cannot do it. So I have to step back. And, and the boundary, a healthy boundary, will prevent that from happening because you are taking care of yourself. It's for you. It's not, and that's not to say that if there is a relapse, you don't slip a little bit. We're humans. We're human nature. I mean, we have hearts. We care. We love. We're parents. We love our loved ones. So, of course, you're going to feel pain. It's going to sting. You're going to, for a moment, maybe go back there, but it does not last long.
Well,
if you're
exactly
in a certain place.
Just like slip versus
slip.
relapse.
Yeah.
You come right back.
Yeah.
But can you talk about why that's such an intoxicating addiction from this side of the equation? Like you said, that becomes our addiction, that dance between hope and the fear of death. Talk about where's the high, right? People use drugs because there's a high. There's a behavior addiction because there's a dopamine release somewhere. Mm-hmm. What's it attaching to in this dance?
Oh, there's that, that out of control, you want to control. Out of control, anxiety, oh, this makes me feel so much better.
Yeah.
That's my high. I don't like uncertainty. I don't like the craziness of something going on, so I'm going to stop it. And that's the addiction.
Oh, good.
Right?
What about you, Janie? How would you explain that high? What are you going after? What's the fix?
Control.
Control feels good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Control, like I said, us that suffer with our disease want to control a perfect outcome.
Mm-hmm.
I love my son more than anything, so that's not going to change that, and I love who he is, not the, addict self, or the monster or whatever that is. But so that doesn't change. If anything, it gets stronger.
It does. Because it becomes you and your son against the disease.
Absolutely.
And not me against my son.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. I like that.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
And that's part of the process, right? Is to be able to identify that when my son is in his addiction, that's not really my son's behavior. Yes. My son's behavior is this, but when he's in the addiction, he's a whole different person. And sometimes that's the process, because sometimes it's hard to break that down because you see it all as one, and it's really two separate focuses.
It is.
So
schizophrenia in its finest.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And so are we, right?
Yeah.
When we're in
our... Oh my gosh,
mm-hmm.
yes. Once again, there's that parallel.
Yeah.
There's that...
Definitely.
That track, yeah.
Definitely.
So as you guys look out into the ethers, and we're talking to people we'll never meet, they're seeing us here, what would be your your wisdom, what would you want to leave them with? If anything else, like, what would you want them to take from just listening to you here today that you wished you might have had at the beginning of your journey?
The one thing that I would like to leave people with is understanding that we are just like our loved ones with the disease, and it's not something you want to go alone. You need to have someone to support you through this, understand it, teach you that you don't have to stay where you are regardless of where your loved one's at, that you are a person, and that you, with a program or an involvement with a group, will give you some of that freedom. It's just so important that you can't do it. This is a disease that you can't do alone.
No way.
No way, you just cannot. And I know in my situation, I tried for a long time because I didn't want to recognize it, that I was also sick, right?
That's
I mean,
a tough one.
It was always them, and then I realized that you're the one that's not sleeping at night. You're the one that's not eating. You're the one that has basically let go of all of your other family, become isolated yourself.
Mm-hmm.
All of those same characteristics that someone in addiction's going through, you soon have that same illness, that same disease. And so it's the same for them as it is for us. It's a disease you cannot fight by yourself. And so my recommendation is, or suggestion would be, to identify that you can't do this alone. You need you need support groups like we have on Sunday to help us through.
Yes.
Yeah, I jump on that, Janie, totally. I mean, it takes a village at times, a lot of the time, and the understanding and compassion and knowledge that we share with each other is tremendous. I mean, you can't do this alone, and so that's probably the one thing that I don't think I can say anything more to other than get yourself to a group. There are so many out there. Pick up information. The addiction world has changed so much from when I started back in 2010 to where it is today.
Oh, yeah.
Night and day. And it's such a good thing. There's so much out there. But our Sunday group is unique.
Can I pause you for a minute? Because I would like you to say each of the groups that you know about that have helped you.
Sure.
And what maybe a little bit about each one of them and how they're different. Because what Neil can do is he can splice in while you're talking, like the logos or the websites for each of those.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's see. The very first group I attended was Al-Anon. And that's a very structured group, and Janie can certainly address that because that's one of your key groups. I've been to Families Anonymous, which follows the 12 steps, and it's a fabulous group. And I mean, do you want me to say more about each group, or
just how they're different? Like, what's different about this one from this one, and why would someone go to this one over this one? Like, help navigate people through.
I think, Al-Anon, I'll let Janie discuss. Families Anonymous is, they have different books that they use, and they, you follow the 12 steps.
Well, it sounds like it's different in that it doesn't have you subscribing to a disease model of your own, like maybe Al-Anon would. Right. I don't know. Is that an accurate assessment? I think that's why it's called Families Anonymous.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's I mean, it's been a while since I've been to a Families Anonymous group, but I think pretty much what you just said is pretty spot on with how they differ from Al-Anon. I've been to Nar-Anon, and that is for pretty much for narcotics, opiates, that type of thing. So That was back in New Jersey as well, and that was kind of neat because your makeup of the group, everyone was the same in terms of, our experiences with the drug of choice was all narcotics. And so there was definitely, kind of a different dialogue than certainly in Al-Anon, the groups that I've been to.
Thank you. Janie, what about you?
At me, basically, I've been to individual therapy, right? So I have one-on-one connection with a therapist. And then I also have, over the years, been going to Al-Anon. And Al-Anon is a 12-step program that is based after the same program as Alcoholics Anonymous. So you use the same 12 steps, but the focus is on you and not your loved one that's dealing with the addiction. So the 12 steps they're the same thing, and like Kamrin has said, doesn't matter what side you're on, you suffer with the same effects and the same thinking process if you are the codependent or the one in active alcohol, even just in the addiction, whatever that addiction is. And so Al-Anon has, it really gives us the strength and hope of each other. It's similar to our Sunday meeting where we focus on ourselves and not our loved one, except it doesn't have the professional guidance that we have in our Sunday meeting, but it gives you some of the same tools and the same language and the same understanding. And so to me it's similar but different.
Yeah, I can see that. Thank you.
So that's what it.
The ones that I know about that address a lot of the codependency issues are ACOA, Adult Children of Alcoholics. They also have a 12-step book and stories just like the 12-step big book has, and it guides you through what it's like to be an adult child of someone who raised you as an alcoholic. The other one is Codependence Anonymous, and they target just codependency issues. Codependency issues are very different than being dependent upon just other people in general, because codependency is on one person, right? So it's using one person as your drug of choice, and so they're very specific to that niche as well. If I could leave this with a nice little pretty bow, I think what I would want to let everyone know who's listening here is that piece of you that you have covered up, that piece of you that you feel has died, that soulful connection you have with your own needs and your own desires, is really all about that intuitive side of us that has been snuffed out. And I would say that what recovery in this program gives us is our intuition back, our ability to trust ourselves again. Because when we're in relationship with an addictive person, they attack that first. They gaslight, they manipulate, they make us feel crazy. They're using all of our hot button trigger points against us, so we stop trusting our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own impressions. And that is the greatest loss that this disease has taken from anyone who suffers from it. And so what I would say is there is hope there. There's hope that you can start to get your intuition back. That, when you're being told, you're crazy, I didn't take that saw at the garage. Oh, yes, you took that saw. I know you did, right? And you feel it, and you don't let them talk you down anymore. It's yours. You own it. This, like you said, Janie, it's so isolating. People from the outside looking in saying, why do you keep enabling this? Why do you keep doing this? It's so easy. You just stop, right? It's that same craziness that people who struggle with addiction have when they're like, why don't you just not drink? I don't drink every week, it's so easy for people who don't have this to look at us and guide our lives and tell us how to live it. And so that also contributes to our feelings of, I can't trust anything that goes through my own head. My needs aren't important, right? It's all part of that. And so that's why I think getting in these groups heals us, is because now we're around a whole bunch of people who talk the way we do, who we don't even have to explain, and they've got tears in their eyes too as we tell our story. And that piece of it makes for the healing that we're all in this about, right? That's why we do it. And so I really just want to, let everyone know you're not crazy. You do have access to this intuition. It's still there, even though you haven't listened to it for a while. Just kind of like an old car, got to jump start it a few times and maybe replace the battery. Find a new normal, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Well, do you have anything else that we haven't discussed that you want to make sure that we do?
I don't believe so.
I think
No,
we've really done an
it's
amazing
good.
job. I thank you so much for being here. I know we've kind of been running around with this idea for a while now, and you guys have been warming up to it, and to finally agree and to feel comfortable enough is really neat to be able to see you sitting here and sharing your stories so openly. And I know so many people are going to benefit from that. So,
Well, we represent a great group.
Good.
I mean, there are a lot of people in that room every Sunday that, hopefully their voices have, been heard through us. So it's not just us. It's a great group. It's fabulous.
It really is.
Yeah.
And as I want to, get everyone excited about the fact that, yes, this is a community group, but with Neil's help, the man behind the camera, he's going to be creating a link on the Brighton webpage that will allow people to be a part of that Sunday community group, even if they're not able to be there personally.
Great.
So we'll have a video camera there, a mic there, and what that will serve to do is let people who maybe were a part of our family programming and flew in to support family members and really got benefit out of being there and want to keep doing that, they can just click on that link, go there on Sundays and be a part of our group.
Fabulous.
Also for people who, are in the pre-beginning stages and don't want to go show up to a group, maybe they can't leave their house, maybe they're too scared to leave their house, it gives them that warm up to get confident enough to start attending groups maybe.
That's great.
And so I'm really excited. Thank you, Neil, for spearheading that with us. And it'll be over a HIPAA compliant medium, so you don't have to worry about any of that privacy getting out. It still will be a very confidential meeting, and we'll just have a disclaimer that says, please, be in a private space where others can't hear, and
Wow.
we'll just respect it that way. So
Wow.
it'll be neat, right?
That is fabulous.
That's coming.
Yeah.
That's coming.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I also want to thank you because I'll be using the material at a conference that I'm presenting on in Coronado in April, and everything that you guys have done in the group over these last 3 years and everything that you gave me here today is going to be part of what continues to go out and educate other healing professionals that are looking to help and maybe even start groups of their own like this as well.
good.
So
Excellent.
the ripple effect is just huge, and I want you and everybody who's a part of this to feel that, because it really is quite amazing. It's got a life of its own.
Wow.
If you would have told me 5 years ago that this would be my niche and my specialty, I would have laughed, because I didn't even know what codependency was to the degree that I do now. And I'm so grateful to have been pulled into it, because it has blessed my life as much as it's blessed anyone else's.
It really has.
Yeah.
It really has. Yeah.
So thank you.
Terrific. Thank you.
All right. Well, if you've enjoyed what you've seen here today, please visit us on any of your favorite podcast mediums, Google's Play, Stitcher, iTunes, and feel free to visit our website or be our friend on Facebook, and you can follow these podcasts as well. We've got a lot of them out there. A lot of the blogs that I've mentioned are also listed and posted there. The one on the roller coaster is there. The one on
That's so
boundaries
good.
is there.
So good.
And so if you want to just learn more, go in depth about the concepts that we've been discussing today, please do so. Thank you again, and
Thank you.
yeah, we'll see you
Thanks.
next time.